Welcome to the House of Shadows and Ink. Steve Mardo, what a pleasure to have you. Take a minute or two and just introduce yourself. Tell us what you do.
Okay, so thank you for having me. I'm Steve Mardo. I'm an illustrator and comic book artist. I'm from Rhode Island in the good old U.S. Uh, I do a lot of cosmic horror kind of artwork. That's kind of been something that I've been leaning towards in the past decade. I started out kind of doing, the whole superhero genre kind of stuff and putting my artwork into more. I try to do like more like illustration work, but my heart has always been kind of in the world of kind of like almost like supernatural kind of stuff and comics. So I've kind of literally kind of just been redefining a lot of my art in the last probably 5 years or so, and kind of switched gears a little bit into stuff that was a little less superhero and a little more in the realm of like cosmic horror and just kind of strange pulp art.
Cool. Well, if like we've done a lot of Swamp Thing videos lately, and the big thing that comes up, and I'm also working on a Wes Craven book with a bunch of authors, and the big
Awesome.
thing with Swamp Thing is he's a monster, but he's the good guy. So he's a superhero. I mean, plain and simple. He's where you'd normally expect the monster to be the villain. He's the superhero. So me personally, I'm a big fan of that kind of artwork. I mean, that the artwork in the comic book blew me away. The CGI doesn't look so good anymore today. Oh, well, it was costumes back then, but it was still awesome for its time. But yeah, so there's definitely like a market for that. Cosmic horror, lots of authors working on that. So where did everything get started? I mean, did you just naturally draw well as a kid?
I started drawing when I was probably around 4 years old, and my parents still are very supportive of what I do. Even though I think they don't get half of the stuff I make, but they knew I had a talent at a young age, and they kind of said keep doing it. And at 7, I kind of realized like, oh, I can draw better than a lot of kids in class. And when I was 11, that's when like I had read comics and I loved cartoons. I actually wanted to be an animator, but then I found out just how tedious, especially back then, animation was, and I was like, nope, I'm not gonna sit there and just draw and draw and draw. I want to draw like one image and that's it. So I kind of really found comics, and actually I have the first comic that got me into it right here. It's this one, Spider-Man number 14 by Todd
Nice.
McFarlane. That's the one I bought too at the comic store when it was like the comics boom back in the 90s.
Wow.
And that totally blew the doors open for me. And then Spawn came out after that, and then that was like a
Nice.
huge thing with Todd McFarlane. So that kind of like
Yeah,
really
Todd's
directed.
amazing.
Yeah, that directed my whole kind of like, oh, okay, like you can do a different kind of superhero that's not like Spider-Man or whatever. And I think it's funny because like we talk about like horror and stuff like that, and I never really grew up being like a horror kid or anything like that. But it's funny because like when I think back about all the stuff I was taking in as a kid, it was probably the stuff that really interested me was like the horror, because there wasn't comic book movies back then. Like you said, you had like Swamp Thing, which was like a superhero movie back in the like 80s and 90s or whatever. And it wasn't back then, it was kind of considered a B movie. And
there weren't a lot of them. That
no,
was it. And Spawn, those guys came along. Yeah, no,
yeah.
that's awesome.
And I'm also from Rhode
mm,
Island too, which is the Lovecraft,
mm,
the whole thing with that. To be honest, like growing up, I spent I lived like probably like 10 minutes away from Providence. So when I was a kid, I got my license and I drove to Providence, and I spent like obscene amounts of time in the city, and I would always walk by the Lovecraft house, and I had no clue what it was. I
nice.
was just like, because I didn't really know. I knew about Cthulhu and I knew about like Reanimator and stuff, but I didn't know what any of that stuff was. I was kind of just like, and it was like, oh, that's too weird or whatever. But then like I would walk by it, and I thought it was like a house that like some pilgrim made, because it's like this Dutch house. I thought they were like these like Dutch pilgrims that made this house that was like this big thing. And then like as I got older, I realized exactly what that was. And
Sure.
I was like, oh, okay, now I see how it's a big deal. But yeah, for better or worse, that has been, his work has been another kind of thing that's also kind of cultivated some of the artwork that I make now.
I like how you use the word cult in that word. The cultivate. So when someone approaches you for a project, like, do you prefer a lot of guidance, like they need to tell you what they want, or do you want like as much room as possible for your own creativity?
I think some of the best editors, art directors, people who have like commissioned me or whatever, they're the ones that give the least guidance. You know, they kind of either hire me or pick me because they see what I do and they see what I do well, and they kind of just like, just do what you want. Like I did a lot of covers for a magazine in Providence for like a very long time, and they were one of the best places I worked for because they were just kind of just like, hey, you know what, we got this thing going on. If you want to make it weird, make it weird. You know what I mean? So they would, you know, as long as it went by
Nice.
certain, you know, certain guidelines, but they would like, you know, you can just go off and do whatever. And some of the best cover art that I've ever done actually was from art directors who were like, you know, this is the subject matter, but do it in your way, in your style. And then, you know, that gives me a lot of freedom to kind of go crazy. Cause I do kind of have a weird style. Like I'm a very, detailed artist. And I love like just the crazy, and I love drawing like crazy monsters and things like that too. So, you know, I can draw like pretty
That's
people and stuff, but I don't find that fun.
it's good that you go into detail, because a lot of comics these days, it's like it's rushed, like, mass produced. There's not a lot of fine detail. So it's good when you get those projects that still like take their time, quality over quantity, that's kind of thing. So like book covers, interior artwork, comic books, what different mediums have you created for?
Well, my career has spanned, I've been doing this probably for like 14 years now. And it started out like when I went to college. I went to a school in New York, School of Visual Arts, for a year. And that was amazing because it was a college that took comics very seriously. Like Will Eisner went there, you know, just like Joe Quesada, like a lot of really influential comic book artists went to that school. And so it was really cool to go to a college and actually like have people take it seriously and not just like, hey, this is just funny books or whatever. And I went there for a year. I learned a ton of stuff. And then I ended up finishing in Boston at Massachusetts College of Art and Design. And it was another amazing experience too. But when I left, I kind of wanted to do illustration work. I was more kind of like editorial illustration because that's kind of what everyone kind of veers you into. And I realized like a lot of my artwork was very detailed. And sometimes when you're working in editorial, it kind of has to be like almost a marketing thing. Like they don't want that eye on that image too much. You know what I mean? There's like a nice balance. So, and I think I just wasn't a good fit. I tried to be like clever with certain artwork and things like that. And I tried to be very like, you know, a little too pretentious with some of the artwork that I look back on now. And I wasn't really being myself. And I just grew into like, I would do illustration work for the money. And then I would do comics for the kind of, it would be like the passion projects and the love. But as things kind of went on, I realized I love just making comics. I love telling a story. I love, you know, doing cool stuff with images. And I love the whole process of narrative, visual narrative. So, you know, I started off learning everything. I wanted to learn everything when I went to college. I wanted to learn painting, and I wanted to learn digital and traditional and all these different things, oils and pastels. And I dabbled in a little bit of everything. And I realized, you know, the thing that I had a teacher who I was kind of like doing all this work. I was like doing paintings and stuff like that. And I had all these like pen and ink drawings, and that were kind of just like cartoony kind of pen and ink drawings. And I had them and this is the final year, my senior year of college, and for my illustration degree. And he walked over and he saw these like paintings I was doing, and, you know, I was struggling with the painting, and I was kind of like, you know, I wasn't quite there yet because painting takes a very long time to really master. And he saw these like pen and ink illustrations that I did, and he was like, what are these? And I was like, oh, these are just kind of things I just do. And he's like, how long does it take you to do these things? And I was like, you know, they don't take that long, not nearly as long as a painting. And he's like, well, what are you doing? He's like, do you have fun doing these? And I was like, yeah, I love doing these things. And he's like, then like, don't paint, like do this work. Like if you love it, first of all, it's going to be fun. Second of all, if you're working for a magazine or something, they're going to want this stuff really quick. So if you can do it quick and you can love it and you can make it look good, do that. I kind of literally after that, it was kind of like, oh, the epiphany, like, oh, okay, I don't have to be jack of all trades,
True.
master of none. I'll just pick that one thing. And so I kind of have stuck with pen, ink, and digital coloring since for the past like decade. So yeah, that was kind of
Oh, that's
the
cool.
light bulb. So I had that good
I actually
teacher.
wanted to ask, like, what's your preferred? So pen and ink and then the digital. I see a lot
Yeah.
of guys like they do whether it's pencil, pen and ink, whatever, and then it's like you scan it onto the computer and then there's a program and you color it digitally, or how does it work?
Yeah, I like to work larger, I'll do 11 by 17 or even bigger, depending. Some of my influences in comics were um like especially when I really started to get into it was is a guy named Jeff Darrow did stuff with Frank Miller, that book Hard Boiled, and he did a lot of the concept art for the Matrix movies. And he does a book called Shaolin Cowboy now, which is really cool. But he's like hyper. He was a Moebius. He was a student of Moebius. So he draws these like crazy, like super hyper detailed things. And he was kind of one of those guys that I really like gravitated towards. He's kind of like my art god. And I saw him at a convention once. I showed him my work and he was like, oh, this stuff's great. And I was like,
Cool.
Oh my God, like he likes my work. So that was like a huge bucket list thing to meet him. But to go back to what we're saying, yeah, a lot of people, they do now, everything is done like on an iPad. Like I work on an iPad. I think it's it helps a lot just going full digital, just because it helps with like timing and if you have deadlines and stuff. But I still like to have like an original piece, and then I just scan it in, and then I scan it in pieces. And then sometimes you can kind of, there's like a thing in Photoshop where you can kind of like, it digitally puts it together for you. And then I go in and I color it, because you can get like really saturated bright colors, which I like to do. I like to put this I like to have these like really kind of crazy monsters with like these kind of like weird saturated crazy looking colors. So that's kind of the stuff that I like to do. But yeah, I traditionally like to I work pen and ink traditionally, and then it just helps because it just helps in the long run just to make things just to go digital with color. So sorry, it's
I've
like
seen a lot
mouthful.
of people go, no, that's exactly what we want. I've seen a lot of artists do this. It's not like it's massively easier or faster. I mean, I've seen guys still spend on like artwork for a book, like cover and interior, like 70 to 100 hours on artwork. Yeah. It's unbelievable. So it's still a skill. It's not like the computer's going to do it for you kind of thing.
No, that was a thing growing up. In like, I remember like the 90s and early 2000s being a kid and then being like, oh my God, Photoshop's going to change everything and everyone's going to be able to know how to draw. And all you got to do is, I mean, AI kind of unfortunately does that, but still there's something to AI that you can tell it's AI. And I think people just reject that there's no human hands on it. You know what I mean? Still, I think with even with the digital stuff, you still have to know how to paint and draw and things like that. It can help you. It can do little shortcuts for you. But I think in the long term, if you don't know how to paint, if you don't know how to draw the human figure, if you don't know how to, if you don't know like how to choose color and stuff like that, it's not necessarily going to help you become a better artist. So it's kind of just like little shortcuts. That's kind of what the digital artwork kind of does.
Cool. Yeah. We also, I mean, AI is like taboo in the publishing industry and books and everything, but we still use it not to generate, but to like save us time, video editing, that kind of stuff. I think especially as an artist, you need to know what it can do, what others are using it for, what the pitfalls are. And then you decide like, okay, I'll take a bit of help here, but I'm not going to do that, and that kind of thing.
Yeah. I feel like I kind of stepped away from art for illustration and comic books for a little while, and I'm kind of actually jumping back in the last probably like year or so. But I was doing graphic design work, and where I was working, they kind of did use a little bit of AI for certain things. And I remember using it and being like, okay, like this really, it can be a tool and it can be helpful for stuff. But if you don't really know how to use it, it's like anything else. It's a tool. And I'm not like the biggest fan of it, to be honest, but I think if you need it for certain things, I think it may be helpful. Art-wise, I think you still need to know how to do make art to make art. You know what I mean? Like prompting to me is not a talent, so to speak. But I think
Hopefully never.
yeah. Yeah, hopefully. But I think like for other avenues, I think AI can definitely help out people. And you know what I mean, like video editing and stuff. I've seen people use it for video editing and other things like that. But I think like when it comes to stuff that kind of I think when it comes to stuff where you want a human touch to it, you know, with art and things like that, I think it's already kind of getting this whole like backlash because it's just so it's like too polished and weird looking. You know what AI reminds me of? It reminds me of a night. Yeah, and it looks like some pieces of art look like basically like your nightmares. Like I've seen AI videos of people and I'm like, oh my God, like I've seen that in like a nightmare. Like that's what my nightmares look like. I feel like it's just this weird like it's this weird nightmare tool when you're making like AI video people and like sometimes art. It looks so creepy. I think that's the other thing too. It looks really creepy.
It's like off. There's just something off about it.
Yes. Like you said, it's soulless, so therefore something's very, very low. And I think most people can catch that, you know. Yes. Okay, yeah.
Of someone that you know. You immediately like the connection's not there because the soul is not there. Like that person is gone. It's this empty shell. Now imagine seeing that empty shell move and talk to you. That's what AI feels like. That's the same soulless, disgusting, weird. It's just off. This is not natural feeling that you get.
That is morbidly true. That is morbidly true. I've never thought about it that way. Yeah. That's what it reminds me of. That is so like spot on. That is so crazy.
It's not meant to be. And it's worse than watching a zombie on TV. I mean, that feels more natural.
Yeah, because you know
AI
it's like
artwork.
Yeah.
It's a real person.
That is.
So, can you remember like the first piece of art you ever sold? Like, what was your first like? Wow, now I'm being paid.
I actually did something for so I went back to college when I was in my mid-20s, but before that, I was kind of going to conventions, comic book conventions with friends, and I was trying to get work. And I remember I did a pinup. Like it was funny. Speaking of zombies, it was like a zombie pinup. It was like a zombie guy, and he looked like somebody from like Limp Bizkit or something. And he was like next to like this robot girl, who was was very very like 2000 like early 2000s looking like. And I think I got like $20 for it, and I was just like, oh wow, like I got money for this thing. You know what I mean? Like I got paid for this. And
yeah, then you're hooked. Then it's over.
Yeah. And then and then it kind of went from like that. And then I kind of ended up like just doing a lot of work and then just trying to get my foot in the door. But like a lot of the stuff I was working on was stuff that I just wasn't like into. And it's funny because I've done a lot of work for people who make comics and things like that. And I've done some stuff where it's like you do the whole entire thing and it's people pay you to do it, but it never comes out. And it's kind of weird how that works sometimes. That's why I kind of feel sometimes, I know a lot of people like with movies or comics or any kind of entertainment that comes out, I don't really badmouth stuff like that anymore. Like I don't really be like, oh, that movie, was awful. They could have done a lot better, because to put out anything into this world in this kind of like fast pace, especially now in this fast paced world, to put out something and to have people actually gravitate towards it, I'll give you kudos for that, because, I don't really badmouth stuff anymore like that. I used to when I was younger. Same. I'd be like, oh my God, that's so terrible. Like they could have done better on that or this and that. But with the way everything is now and how fast paced it is for people to catch people's attention for anything, I give people a lot of credit who try to put stuff out. So yeah, but yeah, the first job I ever got,
that far.
Yeah, just get that far. Making a comics is it takes a village. You know what I mean? Like to make a comic, it is definitely to do it yourself. I know people that publish comics themselves and they do everything themselves, and it's like, man, there's only 24 hours in a day. How do you squeeze all that in? You know what I mean? So I give them a lot of credit. So
yeah, we did our first comic book this year, and it's actually been like 2 years in the making. It involved a lot more people than I thought it would. It cost a lot more than I thought it would. The comic book is actually more expensive than a board game we designed this year, which is unbelievable. Yeah. It's just crazy. But I mean, that's what you get when you get like amazing work done. the amount of artwork you need is so much more
Hmm.
than for a game, well, a board game at least.
I think too, you know, the comics industry as a whole, I think is also kind of like, it's a very weird industry. I mean, I don't know if how much you've delved into it. It's so weird. It's like the Wild West. There's so much going on, and so many publishers that they have these kinds of artists doing this and this kind of artist doing that, and then sometimes things come out, sometimes things don't, and then yeah, it's a weird industry. There's a lot. It's funny, when I stepped away from it and I kind of came back in, I had that kind of like bird's eye view of the comic book industry, and you know, I love comics. Comics is basic. It's in me. It's you know, it's in my DNA. But there's a lot of artists out there, I think, who a lot of, you know, writers, artists, you know, you name it, letterers, colorists. We do a lot of work, and I think a lot of it we don't, you know, necessarily get the dues or the pay that we want for this stuff. So yeah, it's tough. It's weird. You have to kind of be like your own cheerleader with comics. I don't know. I don't know where I'm going with this, but but yeah, it is.
No,
it is a very it's a very tedious job, and I think I always call comics the blue collar artwork, the blue collar of art, because like
it is art. People shouldn't forget. I mean, and comics have become expensive, but when you buy that thing, and that is a piece of art, it's a piece of history. I mean, it contains like the souls of every person who worked on it.
Yeah.
And like their history and everything they went through up until that point, like coming together in just this amazing piece of artwork. I mean, if you look back to some of the big comic books that you admire, I mean, and you look at the people who worked on that, like, and you say, oh, I can't believe this guy and this guy worked together on that book. And that's the magic that came from it. So that would not have been possible with, I think, just one person working on it, or like someone using AI to put in the rest that they couldn't do. That's why I think it's so important people need to know the artists, because someone is going to be the next. Was it Jack Kirby and McFarlane and all these guys? Like,
yeah.
Someone's going to take their spot.
There are a lot of amazing comic book artists out there now. You know, I think because people actually like take it. I mean, this is the thing, back in the 60s, 70s, even the 80s, like if you did comic book art, it was kind of like, you know, you were almost like a pariah or something. Like nobody didn't even want their names listed on the books because they didn't want people to know that they were making it. It was kind of like the pulp books, the old pulp books from like the 1950s and stuff like that, and late 40s. Like a lot of those. Yeah, a lot of those artists, they did amazing covers, and then you find out that, like, you know, who they were or something like that. You find out it was like NC Wyeth or something like that. You find out it's like some like, you know, amazing artist, but they didn't want their name on it because back then that was like, oh, I don't want to be, you know, associated with that stuff. And now it's like it's a totally different. It's totally switched lanes, and it's that's the other thing too. Comics is a multi-billion-dollar business. It's $1 billion business. So it's one of those things, not to like get too much into the weeds on that, but like, yeah, like the artists should be getting, you know, their dues, and they should be, you know their worth as illustrators and artists and stuff like that. And I know, you know, like you said before, the AI stuff, yeah, you can go and just prompt something and make something up, but people are going to look at that cover, or they're going to look at that interior art, and they're going to say, okay, it's okay. It's all right. But like, there's nothing to it. It's like eating junk food. You know what I mean? There's nothing nutritious about it.
True.
But yeah,
and
it's like that. It's like that. So
no, I agree. Corpse. Who would you say is like your favorite author, or like, do you have a favorite team to work with already, or are you still like whoever's on the job?
Well, like I said, I'm kind of jumping back into all this, but before I was working with artist and writer named Joe Schmalke, and he does a lot of horror books. He puts out, he's a guy, he kind of does everything himself. Like, he's an amazing artist, amazing writer. He does basically horror books. But I worked with him on a book called Murder Hobo. That was kind of like my first kind of jump into stuff. And it's kind of like a play on the RPG term of a murder hobo is somebody who just goes around and just kills everybody and just takes everything. So I did some interior work for him and I did covers for him, and he just and he's such a sweet guy, like you wouldn't tell it by the content he writes.
No.
I mean, he does a book now called 7 Years in Darkness, and it's basically like Harry Potter meets like Squid Games. It's like, it's crazy. It's like, it's really dark, but he does really cool stuff. And I've worked with him in the past, and I think too, it's who you work with. Like, I think you see a lot of these artists and writers, and you notice like they all will work on a book together, and you'll be like, oh, okay, like this artist and this writer worked on why do they work on so many books together? Or why do they work on all these projects together? And you realize it's because you become friends with these people, and you realize like there's a groove to it, and you get to know the person, and it's very much like, art and working with people, especially with comics, because I guess, like I said, it's a bunch of people. You have these personalities, and it's like, who's the personalities that you work with best? Who's the people that you meld with best? Who's the people who you can sit and, have a beer and bullcrap with for an hour? You know what I mean? Like, those are the people who you're going to work with. And those are the people who you're going to you're going to make the best artwork with, because you tend to find a trust with each other. You tend to be like, okay, well, you're going to have this in by that time. And then it's kind of a thing where, you kind of grow that ring of people where like you meet this person, you go to a convention, you meet this person, and you go to a convention, you meet that person who knows this person. It's a very weird, like, sexual, like, comics can be very like this weird, like, it's such a small niche community that, this person leads to this person, that person. So yeah, but once you're in it, it's weird like that. So it's, to me, it's been kind of like, who the best work I've done, like I said before, the best work I've done are the people who, they like my work. I am like basically kind of like friends with them, or I am friends with them. And that's kind of how it all comes together. So I think something special comes out of that too, when you make something. Yeah.
I actually talked to an actor a while ago who, they put those little dots. I keep forgetting the word, but then they like Godzilla and Kong and all these
the mocap
creatures. And yes, and he asked one of the producer guys, like, just when AI started becoming an issue, I think that's before Hollywood, like, they signed the contracts not to use AI and all that stuff. And he asked the guy, like, so what, are we going to have jobs soon? And they said, there's no way they're going to replace you guys, or we want to replace you guys with AI, because who am I going to hang out with? Like, we make the best teams. We have so much fun for like 9 months to a year. We're like best friends. I can't wait to make movies with you again. Who's going to throw that away? Well, you're going to get some idiots who will fire everyone just so they can save money. But I mean, is the final product really going to be worthwhile? Is it going to be memorable for the right reasons? I highly doubt it. So, well, thankfully that they are protected now. But yeah, we'll see what happens. We know these uncertain times always come, and we just need to find a way to adapt. In any industry, adapt or die. That's why I believe you have to learn. You have to, like, there's this thing about, like, you have to lean in and discover and then decide, instead of just like turning your back on something and hoping it goes away and then you're left behind and you don't have work. That kind of, you don't want that.
There's certain things that I believe, like, I remember when, like I said, this is going back, I remember Photoshop and all these things came out, and like people were like, oh, computers going to take over and they're going to, there's going to be no need for people to draw stuff, or like anyone's going to be able to draw, and we're not going to need talent or whatever. But I think too, like, even if you have a certain style, if you have a weird, quirky style, a computer's not going to be able to emulate that. A computer's not going to be art to me. I think the biggest thing that people don't understand, I teach comics too, and there's a lot of, and I have some young kids in there, and they want to be like, oh, I want to draw this like this, and I want to draw like this guy or whatever. And I think the biggest thing that people don't understand about art is that art, you get better as you get older, and it's because of your experiences in life. You find out what you like, you find out what you don't like. You have experiences with this, you have experiences with that. If you're a writer, I guess I would say it's the same thing with a writer. I would gather, like, there's certain things in your life that happen and you want to write more about that because it's closer to your heart. I feel like it's the same thing with art. Like when I was in comics, I loved McFarlane, and I loved, all those image guys from the 90s. And I was like, those guys know how to draw everything. It's like, they're the best artists and this and that, you know? And then as I got older and, you know, I went to, you know, college, or I would meet other artists, or I'd go to conventions and I'd actually like interact with other artists. I was like, okay, these guys aren't the best artists. Like, you know, a guy like a Will Eisner or a Wally Wood or something like that, the guys that did the EC comics back in the day, those guys were
Nice.
draftsmen. Those guys were like draftsmen. They could draw anything. Like, you told them to draw like a car, they could draw it like boom, boom, boom. Whereas like if you ask like a guy, one of those 90s comics guys, like draw a car, they couldn't do it. You know what I mean? So like you get an appreciation for that, and you get an appreciation for like, you know, your world around you. And I think it's just kind of opening your head up and taking in. And that, I mean, now there's so much stuff going on. And I think this, the other thing is too, that I think is kind of is not that great as social media, because social media, you see people online, they show these like quick, like 20-second things of how they drew this whole giant painting. And it's like, what you don't understand is that that person probably painted that like 50 times. They probably painted or drew that thing. So it's a muscle memory. So like there's certain things I can draw like super quick because I've been drawing that thing. You know, I could draw a certain kind of monster a certain way really quick because I've been drawing it like that's been in my sketchbook for the last 20 years. You know what I mean? So like I've been drawing that same character or that same pose or whatever for 20 years. So I think a lot of people don't understand that like art is just more than just like, it's more than just a talent. It's more than just like learning certain techniques and stuff. It's actually like you being a little, you know, and this may sound a little whatever, but it's like, it's you doing a little introspective work and kind of realizing what you like, what you don't like in life, and just kind of like realizing who you are as a person. I think that's a huge thing, because that's what makes original art too. You know, when you are just kind of following trends and you're just kind of like doing whatever's, you know, on your feed or whatever, and everyone's doing that, it's cool. Yeah, you could probably make a poster of like, you know, Deadpool or something like that and have people buy it. But for the most part, what's really going to stand out is when you start to look in yourself and like, all right, I got these weird ideas that nobody else has. I'm going to make that into art or a book or whatever. And that's when people start to kind of like really being like, oh, okay, like this is different. This is good. It's always going to, you know, trump whatever's like, you know, the big popular thing, because everything's a flash in the pan now.
I agree. And it's what they call the self story. I mean, it's everything that you've consumed up to that point, like movies, comics, artwork, like things that happen to you in your life. And you carry that with you and you like project that into your work to some degree at least. And then you meet up with someone that's coming from his own journey. And I mean, you've been traveling for like 20, 30 years and now you meet up for the first time and you see what comes out. And I mean, it is magic. And then it becomes part of you and then you move on again. And I think that's amazing. And that's what makes the artwork or the story, whatever project it is, unique. Because there is no one else with exactly your same journey or like everyone on that project. But there are people who have gone through similar things and they can recognize that in the work. They feel something. They can't always like articulate what it is, but they like your style because it speaks to them. It's like some music just appeals to you, or some like a style of artwork, genres, whatever. It's like when I was in school, horror movies like pulled people together, and certain types of music pulled people together. And
Absolutely.
and that's how you made your friends. I mean, you had things in common.
Yeah.
So who's the best, or like the, in your case, like, or your mind, the biggest or best artist or project that you've worked on?
Man, I mean, I do like working with Joe. I think we did a book actually called Epic Tavern for Scout Comics, and it was based off of a RPG game. And the writer of the RPG game is also the editor for Joe, this guy Sean French, and he is like, I call him the evil genius, because he's just one of those guys that no matter what he touches, like he can just, he's like a weird brainiac. He'll, you know, he wants to learn something, he'll go in and spend like 20 hours learning it, and then he'll just pop up and be like an expert at it. But he did this book, and we like, I mean, it was kind of towards the tail end of the pandemic, so it kind of I think, and the industry at the time was kind of like a little rocky, but we put like a ton of work into that book, and the story was great, and it was probably some of my favorite artwork that I've ever done. I did there's a double page spread in it. I'll show you.
Nice.
There's a double page spread, and it ended up being like a 16 panel like illustration. It filled my whole entire wall.
Sure.
And it had 150 characters in it that I just kind of like, in the script, he said, the main character walks into like this, like, cause it's like, the name of the book was Tales of Fantastical Crimes Unit. So he's like a detective. So he goes into like this police station full of like all these like crazy like fairies and monsters and stuff like that. And in the script, he had like maybe 5 or 6 characters. And I was like, I'm going to just like do my little Jeff Darrow thing and like keep drawing characters in and keep drawing characters in. And he was like, yeah, he's like, go for it. Do what you want. And I was like, can we make this like really big? And he's like, yeah, just like go crazy with it. Do whatever you want. And then it ended up being like, there was over 150 characters in it. It took like on top of doing the book, they gave me a lot of time to make the book, but it took like almost like, I'd say like a good 2 months to draw.
Sure.
It was huge. The thing was like huge. And we also had on that book, because I live in Rhode Island, I live in New England, and they all like kind of live in like Maine and New Hampshire. So they're like not that far from me. We also had, who's also a friend of us all, is Steve Levine, who is one of the original artists for Ninja Turtles. And he was the original colorist actually and letterer for Ninja Turtles. And he colored the whole book for us. He hated me because like I drew all these characters, but that still to this day is probably like, I love that book. And I remember like me and Sean did a show together and we sold the book to people. And then like the next day they came back to the booth and they were like, I read it. They're like, when's the next one coming out? And they were just like so into it. And we did, it was like I think we put everything into that book, the kitchen sink into that book. But that's the other thing too about certain things is that sometimes some things just don't get off the ground. And it ended up being like a one shot, but we were so proud of it. And just like we had such a fun time doing that book. But yeah, that's like a highlight. That was a highlight because I got to work with Steve Levine and I got to work with Sean, and Joe was kind of overseeing the project a little bit. So like it was really cool just to have like this circle of friends just making like this book. It reminded me of like when I was younger and we would all draw goofy things together and as little kids making our own comics, but as adults, so, and you're getting paid for it. So, which is nice too.
Yeah, for me, it was a dream come true to say like, okay, we're going into comics and like, putting the dream team together and all that stuff.
Yeah.
But for me, it's still kind of, I don't want to say sucks because it was still awesome, but like I'm like the producer guy. Like I just pay the bills and hire the people. I'm not there sitting there and like having fun and drawing with everyone, but it's still cool. I really enjoy it. And that's why I also want to like talk more to the artists and the authors and the editors and everything, just because everyone needs to gel more and just like and work together. For instance, like you guys, I mean, if you have the team, you can easily approach, let's say, a best-selling big author that you kind of feel a vibe with their work and say, man, do you still have the comic book rights to your work, to this character, whatever?
Yeah.
And you guys can like pitch them a page or something. I think that's what people need to do more, like from a business sense, just see in which other industries they can like just reach a hand into and like pull something out that you basically have the same audience kind of. I mean, if you understand what I mean.
I agree with you. I think there's so much untapped potential with comics and just like the crossover of a comic. And honestly, I think it's because we're all in this little bubble, and we all think that like it's just this little tiny bubble, and we're kind of on this island, and there's no other islands or no other land around. And the whole thing is that like, I think it's funny because like, when you go, I've never been to San Diego Comic-Con, but like I went to New York for last week for the New York Comic-Con, but like those giant conventions, they're like, media wants that stuff. You know what I mean? Like we were talking about Todd McFarlane, and like I agree with a lot of what he says about like our industry, like the comic book industry, and that how like there is a huge untapped potential. The thing is that stinks is that people want to make like 4 issues of something, and then they want to turn it into a movie or a TV show or something. And it's like, yeah, you could do that, but it's going to be like we talked about before, flash in the pan or something like that. Like you look at Walking Dead or Invincible or, you know, anything Robert Kirkman does basically, you know, even like McFarlane with Spawn, how he had the cartoons and stuff like that. And there were like, there was like at least 100 issues out before they made that into stuff. That gives your writers and the people who are on the creative side more to take out from. So I think,
much.
unfortunately, people want to, you know, make a 4 or 6 issue comic and then they want to sell it to make a quick buck and make you know, and get rights to it and make it into a movie or something. And sometimes that works. Sometimes that does work. I think if it's something where it has legs, but for the most part, I think if you have a little bit more going on with your book, like something like remember the Crow? The Crow was like a 4-issue miniseries thing. Like that was like a small book that had enough where they could make it into something. And then obviously they made it into other books and other movies and stuff. But, you know, that's one of those rare cases, but everything else that's out there, I mean, look at all the stuff that Marvel's doing. They're taking from like 100 years, you know, whatever, 80 years of like history of content and history and stuff like that. So, you know, not to say that you have to go
stories.
Yeah, not to say that you got to spend 20 years to make a book and then put it out to people, but I think some people are putting the cart before the horse sometimes, and they're just like, oh, I'm going to make this thing and it's going to turn into this and it's going to turn into that and I'm going to sell it to like, you know, a production company or whatever. And I don't know, but I think like if you stay on something and you kind of make it work, it seems like that seems to be something that a lot of people are kind of like, especially because that shows too that you have like longevity with the project. You know what I mean? Like I'm the least person to say about that because most of the stuff I've worked on has been like anthologies and like really short comics. But I feel like if you're out to do that and you want to make like content that's beyond the comics, you probably have to have some sort of like little history behind it or something that's going to give it like those extra legs that these you know, these other places can kind of take from and they can meld it into their own thing, you know what I mean? So
in my limited experience with Hollywood, they don't read books. They like to see, you know, those 1-page detailed synopsis kind of thing. They want to see, okay, so there's a comic book, even if it's just like 4, and they see, okay, it's still hot, it's selling well, so there's a fan base. But so I think the guys who do let's say the comic book or the books, they in a hurry to pitch their story and their IP before it dies down, before the sales drop and all that stuff. They don't want to wait around and see if it becomes a legendary, long running, if it has legs kind of thing. They want to pitch before it dies down, which I understand. But I mean, if you can get to that point where this thing is like 10 years and older and people are still excited about the next release, then you've got a winner for sure.
I was thinking, even if it's something where you work on a project for a few years and it has, you know, somewhat, you know, you got 24 issues or something, it's still, I'm sure in those 24 issues, it's not going to be that one character and you're never going to have any background characters or any other supporting characters. Obviously, there'll be more history to it. But yeah, even if it's something where you said, like, if you're putting it out and you're on like a certain amount of issues, you know, I think there's a lot of people out there who just like kind of say, I'm going to make a comic book or I'm going to make a graphic novel and, you know, put it out there and sell it as an IP and get what, and then you have the other end of the thing where it's like you have those people who you know, unfortunately they're kind of like they have that weird, I think as comic book artists we've all been there, we all have that giant, you know, master opus that we want to make that's like a 50-page graphic novel that's this big giant epic, and it's like you're not going to be able to do that either. So you got to find like you probably have to find that nice middle ground or start kind of small and work your way up to that. But yeah, like I've known people who are like, I got this like 150-page comic and it's like got this whole like crazy story arc, and I'm like, that's great, but like that's a lot of work, and like that's years of work. Like you can't pump that out in like 6 months, you know what I mean?
So what would be your ideal dream project to work on? Like an IP, a character?
Ooh. Honestly, it's funny. I was talking about this with another artist, and we were saying like, as much as, you know, like my own stuff, I think like the bucket list for everybody is to draw for Marvel or DC. That's kind of like the bucket list. And when I was a kid, I would probably tell you Batman or Spider-Man. You know, as a kid, I'd be like, those are the books I want to work on. But as I've gotten older and as my tastes have grown out of like the whole comic book genre, I'd probably want to work on like the weirder books. You know what I mean? Like I did a small sample that I sent to like comic book companies and stuff, and it was for Sleepwalker. I don't know if you remember Sleepwalker. That character from the 90s.
That's cool.
I kind of put him as like he's like a superhero version of Freddy Krueger. Like, you know what I mean? Like it's this he's like looks like an alien, and it's weird. Well, he kind of is an alien, but he's from like but like a book like that for Marvel, or even Constantine. Like Constantine is a great book.
Nice.
Like I love Constantine. I think that would be a great character to work on, just because of the whole like background and the history with that. So yeah, those would be like bucket list things that like if I could work on characters like that, you know. I mean, I think Batman is great.
Sure.
You know, it's funny because Batman, when you think about it, he's kind of like a Halloween, he's like a horror kind of. That's why people gravitate towards it, because he has
Very
all these
dark.
like crazy, very dark, horror-y kind of, and some of it delves into street level stuff, and some of it delves into like the supernatural, and you know, so I think, you know, he's one of those characters that I think you could do a lot with too. But it's funny, like I've always loved like the older I got, I always loved like the more like, you know, even Dark Horse stuff like Hellboy and stuff like that was something that just definitely piqued my interest as to like, okay, you can make this kind of weird cosmic horror kind of stuff and make it look cool and not make it look too pulpy and too campy, and it still like has a cool story and like all this stuff to it. Yeah. But yeah, no, definitely probably those kind of characters, like either a Sleepwalker or a Constantine would be definitely something I would, which is probably not on anybody's radar. Like people are probably like, what, Sleepwalker? Yeah, look him up. He had like a very small run, but it was really weird.
Look how many years it took, what's her name? Joker's girlfriend to actually
Harley
make it
Quinn,
from the comics onto like movies. She wasn't like super famous or anything for a long time. So what are you busy with now? Like any special projects, anything coming up, launching soon?
Well, I do right now. I'm working on just like some illustration work. I'm writing some stuff. I believe I just did a cover for, I believe they did a Kickstarter for Murder Hobo. That was like the little, like it was a graphic. It was like all the issues put together. That was on Kickstarter. A lot of my artwork's in there. A lot of like my, I did a backup story and stuff for that book. I did a cover. I believe they're coming out with a second or third volume of the comic, and I did a cover for them. So that's going to be coming out. A lot of the stuff is for 26. I'm working with a writer, Mark Bertinelli. Yeah, Bertinelli. I'm sorry, Mark, if I'm ruining your last name. I've known Mark for like a long time, and we were working on this project together. It's kind of like a pulpy, I don't want to give too much away of it. It's definitely like a pulpy horror kind of comic, but it's got so many different like cool elements to it, and I think
Nice.
I believe I'm working on that stuff now, and we're gonna do a Kickstarter for that at the beginning of 26. So I know like all this stuff is like way out. So, but that's kind of what I have. But right now too, I'm just doing like, you know, commissions for people. I have my website, you know, it's my name, stevemardo.com. And I have like, you know, commission slots that are going to be open for the holidays and stuff like that. If anyone like looks at my work and they want like, you know, commission or something like that. So that, and then I'll be working on I'm actually working on like a small thing for an RPG game too, which is kind of cool. So, but like, it's all stuff I really can't like put out there yet.
Don't share too much. No.
Yeah.
Well, we will have your info below in the description for anyone watching now.
Awesome.
And any new things happening, they can just go to your website to check the links, like to the Kickstarters and stuff. So, Steve, this has been awesome. I love chatting comics. I love chatting artwork. I love chatting about horror and like creativity and all that stuff.
Yeah.
It's the best way to spend your time. So
yeah, this
other
was
than
amazing.
Like creating it, talking about it.
Yes. Oh no, I'm terrible with this stuff. Like I go to conventions and I'll sit and I'll talk to somebody for like 2 hours at my booth. And I remember I had a friend, he's like, what are you doing? He's like, I'm not selling anything. You're just like talking comics and like stuff with people. And I'm
That's
like,
cool.
yeah, you're right. I guess you're right. So like, I'm just one of those people, but like I'm a talker. So, yeah, no,
Well,
definitely.
I'm sure that person will remember that day forever, and you'll like always have a fan. So
Well, I
it's
noticed
not a
that I
waste.
noticed that people, if I do like the convention again, they'll come back to the booth and then they'll
Mm.
buy something or whatever. But like, I really do enjoy. I think when you're in this bubble where you're like a freelancer and you're kind of just like in your studio, and
Oh
when you're in your
yes.
studio and you're kind of just like got the blinders on. When
Mm.
you get out and you actually start talking to people, or go to a convention, or you find somebody that has that same shared love of comics or horror
Mm.
or whatever it is, you just like
If it's
go off. It's like it's
mm.
floodgates.
And if it's not for like conventions and stuff, because like I'm in South Africa, so there's not that many opportunities. I was talking to someone on Saturday, and they had 3 conventions in their city that
Wow.
weekend. So they like moved
Yeah.
from the book thing to a movie thing to like a writing thing. I don't know what. It's like
That's a
unbelievable.
lot. That's crazy.
So when you finally
Wow.
find someone who's
Yeah.
like you can talk to about this stuff, it's like you said, yeah, the floodgates.
Yeah. It truly is. It's like you
Mm.
just kind of go off on like tangents. Like yeah. I could keep talking to you for like this could be a 4-hour long podcast if we wanted to make
and that's
it.
why I wanted to do this, like the House of Shadows and Ink channel. It's not like I don't have enough time running Chris Lake Publishing. It's just like I don't have this community thing. So I went to America earlier this year to the Horror on Main convention, and it was so much fun just chatting with people that I'm like, screw this, let's do something online. And I want people hopefully to watch each other's like interviews and videos and whatever, because it's books, it's comic books, it's board games, it's digital games, it's movies, everything. And actually, because I've seen where I've done live stuff before, I've seen people actually start connecting in the chat on the side and become friends and like exchange emails and stuff. So hopefully that happens in the comments as well, and someone sees this and reaches out to you, and you could start building a work relationship, and who knows what can happen down the line.
Oh, thank you. And that's the other thing too. It's
crossed.
like the other thing is too, a lot of the creators I've worked with on a lot of projects, I've never physically met them. Like who did when I was doing the Epic Tavern thing, I think I knew Sean for like years, and then I didn't actually meet him until like a convention in like Maine that we did together. So it was kind of cool. Like, you have this online, relationship with people and creators and stuff. And then when you actually go to like a convention and you're like, hey, I'm Steve and blah, blah, blah. And everyone's like, oh my God, like that's you and this and that. It's like even crazier. So like it is weird, but yeah, I mean, that's the one good thing about this whole, community of like, the internet and all these different outlets, is that you can find people who have, that kind of love. Yeah. But like I said, thank you so much for having me. This was like crazy.
Awesome.
This was nice. This is nice.
Well, everyone, please check out Steve's work and check back for all the future interviews with creators, authors, artists, movie makers, directors, I don't care, puppeteers, any creative person who has a story to tell, and like, people can make something out of nothing. That's magic right there. So it's not magic to make something disappear. It's magic to make something appear.
Very true.
Well, Steve,
you have a lot of prolific sayings this podcast. I love it. Insights. This podcast is great. Awesome. Thank you.
I actually did an interview with a guy last weekend who's making a documentary about like horror and why we love it so much. And I had like a whole bunch of one-liners, and he said, "Oh, you're definitely going to be in the movie." And I'm like, yes, awesome.
That's awesome. There you go.
Okay. Well, thanks again. Always awesome chatting to creative people. Nice to meet you. And thanks for coming on the show.
Thank you, Joe. Thank you, guys. Thank you.